No, we're recording. Welcome back, everyone. So we've had a great year. We're wrapping it up, and we're wanting to share some of the things that we have reflected on that we really think are the best insights and advice that our guests have been so glorious in sharing with us over the past year. Rachel, take it away.
Let's bring on 2025 with some of the great insights from 2024. So this year was indeed packed with great wisdom from some of the sharpest and, dare I say, funnest minds in the industry. We've got your tips on resumes, on interviews, job fairs, you name it. So get ready to step up your game. I don't know about you, Kathleen, but I'm ready to get this thing started.
So let's do it. Take it away, Rachel. Who should we revisit first?
Well, let's kick it off with a question we get a lot. How many jobs should you really apply for at one company? Well, Mike Barnum at RTX had some great guidance on this one. Quick spoiler, it's about staying focused. Take a listen.
We at any point probably have 50 to 100 material program managers open at just Raytheon. Are they all going to be the same level? No. Does that mean some people aren't qualified for multiple levels? I'm all for somebody applying to as many jobs as they feel they are qualified for. Now, the caveat about that is that one, in our system, Workday, yes, we can see how many you apply to. And some recruiters, if we see that you applied to 70 roles, we're going to click. And sometimes we see them applying to 70 of the same roles. That's okay. You're going after it. That's like having multiple horses in the race. It's when we see someone apply to like a janitor and a director and a supply chain specialist and a software engineer. It's like, I don't know what you want to do. And then you look at the resume and it's like, you clearly have no business applying for a software engineer. So it creates a bias perhaps that you're not really serious about looking for a job. Be targeted, be smart about it.
Great pick there, Rachel, because I know sometimes it's tempting to apply for a whole bunch of jobs.
Yeah. I thought that advice definitely was worth repeating from Mike because I've seen it firsthand. The name that you start to read past because it's on every single role, they become that applicant. So, just don't be that applicant. Kathleen, I know you've got some great advice from friends that we've talked to. So hit me with what you would recommend.
I want to cover something we discussed with my dear friend Doug Monroe over at IMG. In Doug's episode, we talked about the infamous black hole, dun dun dun, aka the applicant tracking system or the ATS. If you're just applying haphazardly, throwing that spaghetti against the wall, sometimes it feels like the ATS is there lurking in the background, out to get you if you're not hearing back from anyone. So let's hear Doug explain and dispel some of the rumors about the ATS system in this sound clip.
First of all, it's not your enemy. It is simply a repository of data. And contrary to some of the fears that have been thrown around the internet, particularly of late, it will not make a decision on your candidacy. A human being will do that. So it's pretty simple with the ATS. Essentially, it's just have a good, clean resume. Don't over-format. We don't need a picture of you. We're not selling real estate. Just keep it straightforward, but tell a story, what you've done. Buzzwords are definitely significant, but don't overdo it. The buzzwords should be relevant to the work that you've actually done. So that simple resume that has the right information in it, that's your ticket. You're in the ATS now. There are certain companies that may have overworked recruiting teams. If they've got 1,000 applicants for a single job, first come, first serve may come into play on occasion. They're going to look through the first 200. And if they've got 10 viable candidates, then it is possible. But again, there is no boogeyman in the corner. The ATS is not out to get you. So just put that good resume in there. But the next step is connect with recruiters. Sometimes you can connect with hiring managers on particular jobs you may find a little harder to do usually. But recruiters are always receptive. They want to hear from potential candidates, even if not for something right now, something in the future. So I highly encourage that. If you're able to figure out who the recruiter is, and often it's labeled right there, contact them directly as well. Put in the application, but contact them directly. Say, hey, I put in an application. I'm really curious to know more about this position. Could we schedule a 5-minute chat? Be aggressive. I don't know any good recruiters who aren't receptive to that.
Doug really dove into that whole networking piece, and it just really made a lot of sense. And I know it resonated with an awful lot of folks.
Yeah, that extra step really makes all the difference.
And speaking of something a little extra, perhaps that's what they've called both you and I, Kathleen, a little something extra. But back to the important stuff about careers here. I think it's also important to talk about tailoring your resume to a job you're applying for, not just uploading that same dead gum one to every single job that you're applying for. Building back onto what Doug shared, this is another element of beating the ATS and improving your chances of making it to that next step. Hannah Nyberg at Black Sky summed up how important it is to tailor your resume. Roll that clip.
The biggest mistake I've seen from day one of recruiting is when people do not craft their resume for the job. I know this sounds perhaps a little silly, but it's so critical. Pretend the recruiter has no idea what they're doing. Pretend the hiring manager has no idea what they're doing. You have to make it explicitly clear that you are qualified, without lying, right, for the position that you're interviewing for. So I tell people, whether it's candidates I'm interviewing, whether it's people I'm coaching, whether it's my sister, have one long resume that has all of your experience. Then when you apply to a job, pull out what's relevant, pull out what they're looking for in that job post, and try to explicitly mirror the requirements on the posting. A recruiter on average spends 7 to 10 seconds looking at a resume to decide if it's worth spending any more time on. That's nothing. I look through hundreds of resumes a day. So when you apply to a job, make sure you're pulling out and mirroring that language to make it clear, at least so you can get that first conversation.
Woohoo! Hannah is spot on. The 7 seconds recruiters spend on your resume means you have to grab their attention really fast. So make it easy for the recruiter to say, yep, this one deserves a deeper dive. And I know 7 seconds sounds extremely fast, but I think that's how long a job seeker takes to look at a job and say, nah, not interested, reading the next job description.
Absolutely. Turnabout's fair play there.
And speaking of job postings, sometimes you shouldn't apply because you're not going to be that good fit for the role. My dear friend Claudia Trail, yes, I have a lot of friends in the community. My dear friend Claudia Trail from RTI Consulting joined us on the show and warned us about judging a job by its title alone. Here's her take on that.
I would say read the job description. Don't apply based on a title. Read the requirements. If you're getting a lot of rejection notices, that's probably why, because your resume is not reflecting the required skills. Desired skills, icing. Required skills, there's no way around that, So I would say read the whole description, not just the title. If it says it requires a TSSCI, don't apply if you have a secret. If it says we have the ability to upgrade you with a clearance, then apply. So just read the position description.
Ooh, I like that one. It might seem straightforward, but if you're just not getting the interviews from all of the efforts, maybe it's time to go back to the basics and make sure that you're actually hitting those must-have qualifications.
Yeah, that's so important. But let's switch gears a little bit here and let's dive into job fairs a little bit more. Jay June of Penguin was a guest on our podcast, but I also got a chance to meet him at one of our Cleared job fairs this year. His team was able to hire 3, I think it was also possibly 4 attendees from the event. So we asked him how job seekers can impress employers at Cleared job fairs. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the things that stood out with those 4 individuals, they came into the job fair knowing the job that they wanted. They came to the table, and those were the people that we met first off. I remember specifically the 2 individuals, we met them. They were our first 2 people that walked over to the table, gave us their name. They let us know that, hey, I've looked at your company online. I like what you do, what the company does. I like what you guys stand for. I've applied for this position. I brought my resume and I'm ready to showcase my skills, and I just need an opportunity. So based off of that, all we did was just kind of navigate and divvy out. So we took the resumes in, gave those resumes over to the hiring manager, and just let them know the passion that they came over to the table with. So there's always things that I liked for candidates to just bring to our attention. If you're passionate about a certain position, let us know. You're always going to be the best advocate for yourself when seeking a new job.
Can I just co-sign on that? That was pretty great advice right there. So do your homework so you can walk into the next job fair ready to make that A+ great impression. And on that note, let's talk a little bit more about interviews. Our favorite topic over here. Cynthia Lisko from Primetime Consulting shared a cautionary tale about taking interviews seriously and making sure you make that great impression. Let's give it a listen.
This is true. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. They started taking their interview in the middle of a grocery store. So I got on the call. I started everything as I normally do. And thankfully, they were on mute up until then. So everything was crystal clear. It was great. And then when I requested some answers, they took themselves off mute. And I thought they were maybe just in a really loud household. But it was more than just that. It was so many different voices. And all of a sudden, I heard an announcement come on over the loudspeaker, and they were announcing either a sale or a cleanup in aisle 5 or something along those lines. And I realized this guy is taking his call, his actual interview call from the grocery store. It was so hard to hear him, and it was so loud. Everything was drowned out. And needless to say, the call kind of ended pretty quickly, and I really wish he would have rescheduled. So we're always open to reschedules. Life happens, things happen. But exactly as you said, Rachel, reschedule. People are totally fine doing that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, let's avoid taking interviews from the produce aisle, please. But on a more serious note, sometimes interview mishaps can be turned into success. Wilton Virgo over at OSD Cape shared a story about improvising during his interview that turned out better than expected. Let's find out what happened with him.
Part of the interview, I had to give a presentation of my current academic work. And at the time, I was working at Harvard in the chemistry department for a Nobel laureate. And we were working on a theoretical project looking at the energies of atoms in different dimensions. Now, the challenge I had was when I got to the Pentagon to do this interview, it was almost disastrous. The technology didn't work. I had my laptop, I had the presentation, I had equations, I had figures all ready to go. None of it worked at all. Okay. And I had a backup, but I couldn't get the backup presentation onto the DoD network. So I was like, okay, this is a disaster. But it taught me a very valuable lesson that I use to this day that's been very useful in just about everything that I do. And I kind of walked through step by step with the audience what I was doing, why it was important, and why the scientific world should really care, and why the broader community should care about this kind of work. And by the end of this presentation, everybody was coming up to me, from military officers to the scientists who were there to people with no technical background, saying, wow, Dr. Virgo, this talk was great. I didn't think I would understand any of this, but the way you explain things, I really understood what you're trying to do and why this is important. And that, again, taught me a really valuable lesson. No matter what the audience is, you have to tailor your presentation to that audience.
I love a good improv adaptability story. So good, Wilton.
And considering the extremely complicated subject matter Wilton deals with, it's impressive how he painted a clear picture to his audience. That's such a valuable soft skill, not just for interviews, but for your entire career.
Definitely. And staying on the topic of interviews, because it's what we like to talk about here. Wayne Schmidt also likes to talk about them and had some fantastic advice on what to do if you get that really hard technical question and you just go blank. Like I just did.
Like I just
Gone
did.
blank.
Blank.
Hit it, Wayne.
As a prospective employee, you always want to be transparent in interviews. If you don't know a specific answer, don't make it up. Especially in technical interviews, it's more likely than not that the people at the company will know that you didn't know that answer and you were trying to fudge it, basically. Instead, tell me, I don't know, and tell me how you would go and find the answer that we're looking for. That, to me, is a much more important skill to find something that you don't know and show the initiative that you want to grow and you're more curious about learning something new than if you just know the memorization answers to a bunch of interview questions that we're going to ask you.
That's a great point by Wayne, and that brings us to another snippet that has to do with transparency. Mel Gilpin at Avian shared some advice about being transparent with your recruiter about your needs. Let's take a listen.
We always want to help people find the right roles. So I always suggest that when people are engaging with their recruiter, their talent acquisition specialist, they're going to want to be honest and transparent about their needs, their requirements. It may feel really tempting to be like, oh yeah, of course, I'd be willing to do that. Throw that wide net out there and see what comes in. But ultimately, you want to make sure that your recruiter knows exactly, hey, these are my lines in the sand. I will not accept these types of position. I'm a firm believer in not showing the bride a dress outside of her budget. I don't want to get somebody's hopes up about an exciting role that is not going to fit their financial requirement. So be as transparent as you can with your recruiter and don't think that you can't reach out to them.
You know I'm a sucker for a good wedding dress analogy. I am so sad that I missed that one. I'm going to have to go back and give a listen because I feel like there's just so much goodness in there.
You can grab the link from the show notes.
You heard it here, folks. We have the links to all of the great episodes on the show notes page. But don't head over there quite yet. There's still a little bit more highlights that you cannot miss. So next, I would love to play you a clip from our chat with Jenny Sykes at Golden Key Group. And this one is interesting because we asked Jenny, what should you do if you start a new job and begin to worry that maybe this just ain't the gig for you? Cue Jenny. Let her roll.
Basic Maslow's hierarchy, having roof over your head and food on table. And if you need that job and you take that job and it was just to suffice, and then you're like, oh, well, wait a minute, what is going on here? Okay, well, yes. But you have to ask, did you give yourself enough time to truly acclimate? Have you given yourself that grace period to get to know your other team members, get to understand them a little bit more on the human level? Have you read through the SOPs? Are they connecting the dots for you? Do you need to ask questions? Nobody can go into a job and just boom, have it all taken care of. We're always learning. So have you given yourself the true grace period to acclimate? Now, if you have, that's when you call your recruiter. So yes, you've got human resources. Yes, they say, first call to first day, that's the recruiter. And then you go over to HR if you have issues, but you still have a relationship with your recruiter, and your recruiter has been your advocate from the start. So if this is not the best match, okay, let's talk about some other opportunities that you may not even know about yet because they haven't even hit the job board. You never know. So give yourself the grace to acclimate, number one. And number two, reach out to your recruiter. It's okay. We're here to help.
Jenny made a great point about checking back in with your recruiter. That recruiter connection doesn't have to end just because you started the job. And the same thing applies if you didn't get the job. If you had a good connection with a recruiter, be sure to add them to your network, check in with them, and keep in touch.
Kathleen, you just know me so well. You just queued me up perfectly because I am so glad that you mentioned cases when you don't get the job, because our next piece of wisdom comes from Chad Clary at V2X, talking about what to do if you don't land the job. Here's Chad.
For those that don't quite make the cut, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be fit for a future role. So I do tell people that if you don't get hired, always ask the person who interviewed you, could you give me some constructive feedback? A lot of us are scared to do that. We don't want to hear what we do wrong because we just don't like to hear it. But that's going to stunt your growth. If you know what you did wrong in an interview or what gaps you need filled, hearing that information is really just going to make you a better person and make you a better qualified candidate for the next time you're up.
Rachel, what a great pick. We love feedback. It may feel a little uncomfortable asking for feedback sometimes, but it's so beneficial when you get it.
There's no reason that you shouldn't ask for feedback. What is the worst that can happen? They'll say no. I think it's worth asking.
It's definitely worth asking. In our recruiter-focused episodes, we've talked about feedback and encouraged recruiters to give it. So for anyone listening, let's all ask for feedback, share feedback, and lift each other up.
It shall be our 2025 resolution. Ask for feedback. Preach on, Kathleen. Preach on. Well, we've got time for one more, Kathleen. I feel like you've earned this honor.
Well, thank you. Yes, let's share what our friend Adam Fife from Suncor had to say. And this one is a great one to end on because it goes beyond your immediate job search. Once you've landed your next role, take what Adam says into consideration before looking for a new job. Here's Adam's hot take on job hopping.
It's one of the dumbest things you can do long-term for your career, period. Because here's what it is, right? You eventually get to a point where your resume becomes toxic. And anyone who's got their full scope listening to this will know it. You're going to get hit up 10 times a week for that extra $2,000 or $3,000. And a lot of times that's tempting, but there's so much value in developing expertise with a particular customer set that over time you make more money because your value becomes significantly higher. Because you're not the one arguing for your position. Your customer is. And I, as the owner and holder of the contract, I'm going to listen to the customer. If the customer comes to me and says, you can't let so-and-so go, or so-and-so just said they're going to leave, they've been here for 3 years, can you throw them an extra $10,000 or $15,000 a year to keep them on board? It's also likely that I'll be able to negotiate with the customer that particular salary increase. But that's because you've demonstrated your value. You're not going to demonstrate your value to a customer, to your company, is if you just keep moving around. So long term, it is absolutely to your benefit. When you find a mission set you like, stick it out. Don't leave. The money will come, and you'll end up making more in the long run than you do by just jumping around.
I just love Adam's point of view on what's going to benefit cleared professionals long term. And speaking of long term, how long have we been at this, Kathleen?
Since 2022, and we're still going strong. So thank you to all of our listeners for spending some time with us before the new year. We enjoyed reflecting on some of our favorite job search tips from this year.
Like Kathleen said, we're still going strong. So if you haven't already, be sure to follow our show so you don't miss any of the amazing upcoming episodes. Until then, rate and review us. And if you loved one of these tips, text this episode to a friend right now. Don't wait, right now.
And we'll see you all next time on Security Cleared Jobs, Who's Hiring and How. Happy holidays from myself, my puppies, my wonderful co-host, our production team, and have a great, safe, and happy new year.
Happy New Year!
Dun, dun, dun.
It's from Doug.
From Doug. And all the puppies.
All the puppies, but Doug just has to be on camera. Yeah. He would actually like to say something.
Woof.
Make sure you rate us
Woof.
right
Woof.
now.
Woof, 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 woof.